Most people assume divorce hearings are about legal arguments. In my experience, they are often about competing stories. The law concerns itself with facts. People arrive carrying narratives. By the time my hearing began, the marriage itself was already over. The paperwork merely existed to formalize what had been emotionally true for months. I expected disagreements. I expected tension. What I didn't expect was how quickly my wife would attempt to transform the courtroom into a stage. Looking back, I shouldn't have been surprised. Narrative had always been one of her strengths. If an argument occurred, she remembered it differently. If a disagreement emerged, motives became more important than actions. Over time, we stopped debating events and started debating interpretations. That pattern followed us into the divorce. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Few spectators sat quietly in the back. Attorneys organized files. The judge reviewed documents. Everything appeared professional, predictable. Then testimony began. At first, my wife's statements focused on familiar topics: the breakdown of the marriage, communication problems, financial disagreements. Normal subjects in a divorce proceeding. Gradually, however, the tone changed. The discussion stopped being about what happened. It became about who I supposedly was: irresponsible, emotionally absent, unreliable. The descriptions were delivered confidently. That was what made them effective. Confidence often resembles credibility until evidence arrives. I sat quietly beside my attorney. Part of me wanted to object. Another part felt exhausted. The marriage had already consumed years of explanation. I wasn't interested in spending another afternoon arguing about my character. The strange thing was that some of what she said contained fragments of truth. I had made mistakes. I had withdrawn during difficult periods. I had failed to recognize problems quickly enough. But partial truths can create misleading conclusions, especially when important context disappears. As testimony continued, I realized something unsettling. My wife genuinely seemed to believe the version of events she was presenting. That realization removed much of my anger. People rarely see themselves as unreliable narrators. They simply organize memories around conclusions they already reached. Eventually, her attorney finished. The room settled into silence. My lawyer stood. Unlike the testimony that came before, his approach was remarkably unemotional. He introduced records, damn correspondence, financial documentation, calendars, written agreements, communication logs, nothing dramatic, no surprise witnesses, no shocking revelations, just documentation. Piece by piece, the discussion shifted. Specific claims were compared against records, dates were verified, decisions were traced through documented communication. The atmosphere changed almost immediately, not because anyone was winning. Because facts tend to narrow the space available for interpretation, the most significant moment arrived when the judge began asking questions, not emotional questions, practical ones, questions connected directly to evidence. Several statements that had sounded persuasive earlier suddenly appeared less certain when examined alongside documentation. The judge reviewed timelines, financial records, correspondence between attorneys, agreements signed by both parties. For the first time that day, conversation focused less on accusation and more on verification. I watched my wife's confidence begin to change, not collapse, simply soften. Certainty became caution, became explanations. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Authority has a unique effect on conflict. When an impartial figure insists upon evidence, storytelling loses some of its power. Hours later, the hearing concluded. The judge issued several findings and clarified disputed issues. The final outcome was more balanced than either side had originally requested. Some positions were accepted, others were rejected. The legal process had done exactly what it was designed to do: separate claims from proof. As people gathered documents and prepared to leave, I felt something unexpected. Relief, not triumph, not satisfaction. Relief. For months I had worried about being permanently reduced to someone else's interpretation of events. My fear disappeared, not because the judge validated everything about me. The judge didn't, nor should he have. I was not blameless, neither was she. The relief came from something simpler. The record now reflected complexity. The marriage had failed for reasons larger than either narrative allowed. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon air felt colder than I remembered. My wife emerged several minutes later. For a moment we stood near the same staircase, two people connected by years of shared history and separated by completely different understandings of it. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to argue. The legal questions had been answered. The emotional ones remained. As she walked away, I realized something that surprised me. Being understood by the court did not heal the marriage. It did not erase disappointment. It did not recover lost years. Fairness and healing are different things. One can exist without the other. Hearing had delivered fairness. Healing would have to come later, and perhaps from somewhere else entirely. I watched her disappear into the crowd. Then I turned toward my car. The story of our marriage would probably remain different depending on who told it. Perhaps that was unavoidable. But at least one version now existed that relied on evidence instead of certainty. For that day, that was enough.